With June 2024's surprising and delightful reveal of the long-awaited return of the Mario and Luigi series in the form of the puntastically titled Mario and Luigi Brothership, the eagle-eyed viewers of this channel were soon asking one crucial question: who is actually developing this title? In this video, we're going to do a survey of some of the talent previously associated with the Mario and Luigi series and see where they are now. Then we're going to look at development teams and see who is likely to be both willing and able to take on a major new RPG entry for Nintendo. Traditionally, Mario and Luigi titles were the preserve of Ace developers' Alpha Dream, but regrettably in October 2019, and just shy of the company's 20th anniversary, that studio closed down and its 40 talented employees were let go. However, while Mario and Luigi has a long-running association with Alpha Dream, the franchise is of course owned by Nintendo, so while it's a little surprising, it's not astonishing by any means to see it return. We've seen this kind of jump happen on occasion, such as with Mercury Steam taking over 2D Metroid after a long hiatus, or ND Cube taking over from Hudson Soft the reins of Mario Party, and so on. With regard to our central question, there are really two core considerations here. First, they need an actual development team, either internally or externally, to bring the game to completion. However, they will also need a senior group of developers, probably based in Nintendo, to shepherd the project to completion. So let's just take a look first at the senior staff who have been associated with Mario and Luigi previously. Generally, with investigations such as these, I find it helpful to work backwards from the newest games, but there is a complicating factor here. It's not just that the last game was quite some time ago. Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser's Jr. Journey was a 2018 release in Japan, but that both that and the prior game, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga plus Bowser's Minions, were remakes. You have to go back to 2015 to find a wholly original title, and even that was a somewhat unusual paper jam featuring a Paper Mario crossover in content, though seemingly not in staff. The co-director of Paper Jam and the director of the two 3DS remakes was Shunsuke Kobayashi, but Moby Games reports him as having been involved on titles well away from the Mario field, working as an event director on the iPhone title Fantasian by Mistwalker and as the quality assurance person on the PlayStation 5 title Sandland by Ilka. These are quite different kinds of roles, and it's not entirely clear if Kobayashi-san is freelancing or attached to the company. Mistwalker has a history with Nintendo going back to the Nintendo DS days and the Wii days, but in recent years they seem to be quite squarely in the mobile space, and even their Nintendo projects were co-development deals back in the day. They were not the exclusive development teams. They do have an RPG pedigree, but it would seem a leap to think they would be developing a new premier title for Nintendo. Ilka, on the other hand, is another matter. Most recently, they were famous to Nintendo fans as the devs behind Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, games which released 3 years ago. There was a lot of speculation that this might presage a new era of Ilka-developed Pokémon spin-offs, and they do work in the same building as the newly minted Pokémon subsidiary, Pokémon Works. That said, Ilka has been more closely associated in recent years with Bandai Namco, and its nigh on 400 employees have been working on games such as 2023's One Piece Odyssey, as well as the game Shunsuke Kobayashi was quality assuring Sandland. Nevertheless, a studio as large and diversified as Ilka would certainly be in a good position to take on a development contract. If Ilka were developing another Pokémon game after the 2021 remake, we would expect to see it relatively soon, 3 years being a standard development window. But with a new Pokémon Legends and a new generation expected in the next 18 months, the window for a potential remake to be released in Pokémon is rapidly closing. I still think it would be very surprising if this year closes without some kind of Pokémon content being announced, and although the Dragon Quest 1-3 HD 2D remakes are in the pre-Black Friday slot that Pokémon historically occupies, I could still see the Pokémon company putting something out that they might announce in the August Direct, although the lack of any word around this and the otherwise quite dense schedule in November means I'm going to put this down as only a 50% chance at this point. So, if Nintendo has contact with a team, ILCA, that have produced a premier remake for them, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, they may well have decided to tap them again for something newer. After all, there is precedent for new developers to Nintendo to start with a remake and then progress to something more original, as with Mercury Steam on 2D Metroid and 18, who developed Pikmin 3 Deluxe and then provided a high level of support to Nintendo's own EPD-10 team on Pikmin 4. Generally, we see this with the devs working on the same franchise, but there's no particular reason why, having established that the company can work cordially, punctually, and effectively, Nintendo shouldn't decide to give them something more ambitious, especially if they have people at Nintendo shepherding the development and making sure that everything is going to plan. So, let's step back and see who these producers could be. 2018's Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey was supervised by Mario mainstay Takashi Tezuka and has a massive 5 producers split between Alpha Dream and Nintendo. There's Akira Otani from Nintendo, who has most recently been seen as the producer of Princess Peach Showtime with Good Feel. We have also Toshihara Izuno, the veteran producer and project manager of many of the Mario and Luigi games. While he has not project managed in recent years, he does have special thanks credits on both Animal Crossing New Horizons and Splatoon 3, which makes me suspect that he may have moved into a more senior position, perhaps close to Splatoon and Animal Crossing devs EPT5. Another producer there is Keisuke Terasaki, a veteran Nintendo producer and manager who often works with Kensuke Tanabe, including as a project manager on Luigi's Mansion 3, Paper Mario The Origami King, and WarioWare Get It Together. He was also the producer on 2018 Super Mario Party, as well as Mario Tennis Aces by Camelot. The fact that he has no more recent credits than WarioWare might suggest that he is moving into a more senior producerial role, requiring more of his attention. And Terasaki-san does have a claim to fame as RPG royalty, since long ago, in 1990, he had one sole directing credit. It's a doozy though, as he was behind 1990's Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. But then there's regular project manager for Nintendo Toyokazu Nonaka, who works with external studios, including this year on Another Code Recollection, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, Princess Peach Showtime, and Endless Ocean Luminous. While it's quite likely he may be involved in a new Mario and Luigi project, I don't know this tells us too much about likely development partners that might be doing the legwork on Brothership. However, the 5th and final credit from Mario and Luigi, Bowser's Inside Story and Bowser Jr.'s Journey is Alpha Dream's Yoshihiko Meikawa, who has since supervised Super Mario RPG for Nintendo. He is listed in the Super Mario RPG credits as working at Square Enix, albeit in the Supervision and Product Cooperation departments. Is it possible that Square Enix, surely the granddaddies of Japanese RPGs, could be taking Mario back home, and that Super Mario RPG was only the beginning of the connection? Another case of tasking a team with a remake before something new. The specific developers of the Super Mario RPG remake were Arte Piazza, a small team with a pedigree in quality Square remakes, but it feels unlikely they'd be able to take on a whole new game so soon after Super Mario RPG. And while Square Enix has no shortage of game studios, in recent months they have been shutting down their Western arms. In some senses, if the company is in difficulty, aligning with Nintendo and taking on a prestige property like Mario and Luigi might seem like a sensible bet, except for the fact that Mario and Luigi is literally the poster child for how being celebrated developers of a massively popular franchise is not necessarily going to save you from annihilation, as the late lamented Alpha Dream found out to their cost in 2019. There are of course other people with strong Mario and Luigi pedigree, and Nintendo aren't shy about bringing back talent from the past to shepherd Mario RPGs again, as we saw with Ryota Kawade, the director of the first 3 Paper Mario titles, coming back as a supervisor on the Thousand Year Door for the Nintendo Switch. If there is a king over the mountain for Mario and Luigi, then we probably need to look no further than Hiroyuki Kubota, who started with the hilariously titled Tomato Adventure before graduating to being a mainstay on Mario and Luigi, including being the director of Dream Team and co-director of Paper Jam. It is commonly stated that he is at Monolith Soft now, and certainly he has a credit on Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which did have heavy support from Monolith Soft. That said, I've seen it stated so often across the internet that he's at Monolith Soft that I've struggled to find the original source for that statement. Still, Monolith Soft is almost entirely owned by Nintendo, so this is as good as working at Nintendo as you could get, and with only having a special thanks credit to his name in recent years, it feels like Kubota-san's talents could well be being tapped for something more ambitious that we have yet to see. Okay, so we've surveyed some of the key characters in the orbit of Mario and Luigi. This doesn't mean that Nintendo couldn't draft an entirely new team, of course, but for a company that prizes consistency and that Kyoto watchword, craftsmanship, I think it would be more surprising if they didn't have people with a strong familiarity in the franchise previously coming back over to shepherd this new entry. I would say there has to be a 70% chance that at least one of Hiroyuki Kubota, Shunsuke Kobayashi, or the senior programmer for the last title and Mario & Luigi mainstay, Makoto Aoi, who has not been credited anywhere since Mario & Luigi, last released in 2018, will be on the new game, receiving at least a special thanks credit, but more likely driving production. So, we need to look now at the dev teams that might show some brotherly love to the new Mario & Luigi title. First, let us acknowledge it could be a completely new developer in the Nintendo stable. Not necessarily a new company completely, but someone Nintendo has not worked with or last worked with very many years ago. Nintendo is constantly building new developer relationships. We had Velan in 2020 working on Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, Ilka in 2021 with Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, WayForward with 2023's Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, and in light of all these, it would not be a big surprise if they found a completely new studio to work with on the Mario and Luigi sequel. In particular, the failure of Alpha Dream leaves open the possibility that some of these developers could form their own successor studio, but my hunch is that this is unlike Once Bitten Twice Shy, and with game development becoming more expansive and therefore more expensive, it makes sense to trust bigger teams with games like these rather than neophyte startups. I'm going to put it down then as just a 10% chance that this is a new dev team. So every further prediction and forecast is on the basis that we are looking at a known Nintendo development partner, people with whom Nintendo have an existing history. We've already mentioned some, so let's waste no time and explore. Candidate 1 has to be Ilka. I think the presence of Shunsuke Kobayashi at that studio, coupled with his relatively sparse credits history of late, raises a lot of interest. In fact, while I haven't yet done an exhaustive deep dive of where all the Alpha Dream devs ended up, although if that's something you'd find interesting, let me know in the comments, I have seen it noted by a few people that quite a few ex-Alpha Dream devs have landed at Ilka. The history of Ilka developing recently with the Pokemon Company, which is at least close to Nintendo, is another striking coincidence. Plus, Ilka is a large and diversified studio with proximity to Nintendo, and it seems plausible that they could be developing another title, especially given their relatively sparse recent lineup. Also, I have to say that while the art style looks fun and engaging, I'm not sure it looks hugely expensive, and Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl similarly looked a little rough around the edges. Of course, Ilka may not be working alone, for they have recently been aligned with Bandai Namco, who we absolutely know are developing for Nintendo. Bandai Namco's last game for Nintendo, excluding support work, was 2021's Pokemon Snap. Again, a time period that would easily accommodate work beginning on a new Mario Luigi RPG, which would then be finished in 2024, a classic 3-year development cycle. My hesitation though with both Ilka and Bandai Namco is that if these teams are aligned with Pokemon, I don't think the Pokemon Company would be that keen to lose experienced developers, especially given how much they have had to scale up production in recent years, not just with the leap to HD development, but also now with 2 mainline Pokemon series in the core titles and additionally the Legends games. That's not to say that companies as diversified and large as Bandai and Ilka couldn't manage to produce multiple games for Nintendo, but simply that it seems more likely that the Pokemon Snap devs are working on a new Pokemon-themed title, Pokken Tournament 2 perhaps, or something original that spins off Pokemon, perhaps for that tricky mid-November 2024 slot, rather than pivoting to Mario. Of course, Bandai also have worked with a wide variety of other studios, so it would not be completely impossible to imagine someone left field like, say, Dimps taking it on, even though they don't have a Nintendo track record. I don't have any more evidence than that we've already examined to suggest that ILCA and/or Bandai Namco are behind the new game, but they do feel to me the most plausible candidates overall. And so, assuming that the developers are not new to Nintendo entirely, I'm going to give their involvement a 50% chance. But they are not the only game in town. Candidate 2 is, of course, Intelligent Systems, a team that produced every Paper Mario title to date, and that producer Keisuke Terasaki has worked with extensively in recent years. Intelligent Systems have a long history with RPGs of all sorts, as they are also the developers of Fire Emblem. But would they have had room to develop a game alongside the recent Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door remake? I think the answer has to be yes, and in fact I had a video a few weeks ago exploring this exact possibility. The video is linked if you want to watch it, but the fast food version is that by comparing the credits for The Thousand Year Door and The Origami King, it is possible to identify a very large number of people, including some senior development staff who worked on The Origami King but did not come back for The Thousand Year Door, and presumably they have been working at something over at Intelligent Systems. Now, a few of these people did go over to work on the 2 WarioWare titles that released in recent years, Get It Together and Move It, and I definitely think the move to doing a remake of Paper Mario gave a bit of flexibility to Intelligent Systems to do a wider variety of games, but this doesn't account for the missing developers. Therefore, I think we can say that Intelligent Systems are a highly plausible candidate, but that doesn't necessarily mean they would want to do it, or that Nintendo would choose them to create the new Mario and Luigi. First of all, if the idea is to have a variety of Mario RPGs on the console, it might seem a little strange to have both of their premier Mario RPG franchises under the same roof. Would that make these games feel a little samey? Of course, there are counter-arguments to this. Franchises can benefit from consistency of vision, and if Intelligent Systems could move from a 4-year cadence of Paper Mario releases to a 2-year cadence of Mario RPG releases alternating between Mario and Luigi and the Paper Mario styles, that will give Nintendo a much healthier bench of Mario storytelling games, and if, as their recent polling work suggests, they're interested in the idea of a more story-driven Mario experience, it could make sense to have a singular creative team who can ensure there is consistency across the franchise and across the narratives. It's a tricky balance that Nintendo needs to strike, as while they have traditionally been very cautious and clearly overcautious with the types of characters and the range of experiences they're offering with Mario, they don't want to pivot too far the other way so the brand becomes incoherent and people aren't sure what they're going to get. It's really surprised me that they've gone with 3 Mario RPGs from different branches of their history in a 13-month window, but perhaps it shouldn't surprise me. The Super Mario movie has obviously moved the dial towards story-driven Mario, and so it's natural to want to populate the Switch's game library with games of this style. Also, just logistically, the more arcadey titles that have mass appeal, from tennis, golf and kart to, of course, the mainline 2D and 3D games, have already had their outings on Switch. What you're left with is inevitably the more niche and experimental titles, and so we have had a lot of RPG Mario, but we've also had Mario and Donkey Kong, and I still think there's a fair chance we will get some kind of Dr. Mario representation before the Switch finally fades from us. It's not so much that Dr. Mario figures hugely in Nintendo's long-term plans, but that when you're rifling through the cupboards, eventually you get to the stuff that's right at the back, and cannibalizing the Dr. Mario World mobile game into an NSO exclusive, for example, seems like the kind of thing that would keep the general public in Mario titles for another couple of months. Another advantage on behalf of Intelligent Systems is that they would get to experience some variety in their Mario storytelling. It's clear that they felt creatively hamstrung to at least some degree by recent Nintendo diktats, with Kensuke Tanabe quoted as saying that the team liked and enjoyed creating original characters. After all, gaming is a creative medium and creative people want to be creative. Restrictions are fine to a point, but with double the Mario franchises there is double the opportunity to branch out and do something original. But nothing would be as original as doing a brand new game, and this is something that Intelligent Systems used to do but has not done for a long time. I just don't think they will want to be shackled endlessly to Mario, Fire Emblem and WarioWare, great that those franchises are, given their track record of occasional but consistent bounce of experimentation, of course with titles like Pushmo. The team is expanding a little, but not so drastically that you would anticipate that they could do a new game alongside Paper Mario, alongside Mario and Luigi Brothership. If we look at Goodfield, that development studio split their development efforts with Princess Peach Showtime alongside their own original title, while both Mercury Steam and Grezzo have developed original titles of their own in recent years alongside their Nintendo contract work. Nintendo seems quite happy to encourage this kind of experimentation, and it works quite well to keep creative people satisfied and engaged with their creative muscles regularly flexed, while the development companies themselves have the safety and security of regular Nintendo contract work. Intelligent Systems is closer to Nintendo, physically and historically, but there's no reason to think the same kind of approach will not apply. All things considered, I think Intelligent Systems is a good possibility for the Mario and Luigi dev team, but given just how wide open this field is and how many other strong candidates there are, I'm going to say that if the developers are not new to Nintendo, that Intelligent Systems involvement is only a 10% chance at this point. They're likelier than most individual candidates, but with such an open field as we'll see, I can't give a higher likelihood at this stage. But so far we've stuck with developers that are very much within the orbit of the old Alpha Dream staff. Thing is though, Nintendo do go further afield to find the right developer sometimes. Whoever would have imagined that 2D Metroid would surface again after a hiatus of more than a decade with a Spanish development team? So it's worth considering who Nintendo generally trusts with their RPGs, and in any list that includes Nintendo's greatest RPG partners, a possibility that merits consideration is Grezzo. Grezzo have a tradition of RPGs and their studio is expanding. Question is, would they be in a position to make both Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, as they almost certainly are, and their own original title and another title alongside? The 2D Zelda game has had a fairly healthy 5-year dev cycle, assuming they started after the end of Link's Awakening, and their original title of late was a mobile game. They also do a trade in port work, with Miitopia being brought to the Switch in 2021, and they could quite possibly be working on Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, but I don't think it would have much effect on their core studio work. Grezzo has an impeccable RPG pedigree. It was founded in 2006 by Koichi Ishii, a video game developer who previously worked at Square Enix. Ishii is known for creating the Mana series after all, and after leaving Square Enix, he decided to start his own game development studio, and thus Grezzo was born. With rare exceptions like the 3DS Luigi's Mansion port, they've really stuck in or around the RPG genre, and if Nintendo wanted a dev studio to handle Mario and Luigi, they would surely be quite logical candidates. Since Alpha Dream probably went south around the time of the ill-fated Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story release in the dying days of 3DS console, there has been a quite long potential development window. If you said that, for the sake of argument, they began full development after Link's Awakening concluded in 2019 on both Mario and Luigi and Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and the development team was simply split between the two, a 5-year cycle for 2 mainline original titles sounds plausible and consistent with their pace of output previously, albeit that these are HD Switch titles and they would have been made during an era of COVID. The fact that the Zelda title clearly reuses a lot of assets from Link's Awakening, whereas Mario and Luigi has a new or at least evolved art style, means that they could have tapped more of the artistic team from the Zelda group. We also don't know for sure that Grezzo are the major movers and shakers behind Echoes of Wisdom. They did take the lead on Triforce Heroes, and EPD3, Eiji Aonuma's team, are definitely short-staffed on the 2D development staff, after many of the people who worked on the previous games seem to have moved on within the company or even outside it, something I've deep dived in a separate video. But if Grezzo were offering development support, but not necessarily being fully in the driving seat on this one, it would explain why a Mario and Luigi RPG would be a good shout for them. This is another tough one to judge and to give specific forecasts to, so before I do, let's just name check some of the other regular Nintendo partner studios who could be steering the Brothership. Next Level Games have a terrific history with animation, but the look of this game feels, to me, quite Japanese in style, and I just don't know that Canadian developers are an obvious fit. This also rules out Retro and possibly too Way Forward, who would otherwise be another potential logical fit since Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp was finished around 2 years ago, and the team are clearly interested in keeping the development process with Nintendo alive. Some information has come out to suggest that the development on that game was not entirely charmed, but Nintendo has managed choppy waters before in the development space. They appear to still be working with Mercury Steam despite some negative press around Metroid Dread's release concerning treatment of some of the dev team. Perhaps more likely than that is the notion of Monolith Soft working on the title, but this still seems like a big stretch to imagine, even though the possibility remains of a smaller nod like a special thanks credit, and that would not surprise me in the slightest. But while I could see the company diversifying a lot in the years ahead, beyond being just a Xenoblade studio plus a support studio for Nintendo, I'm sure the developers there would love to do more diverse things, and while they have an impeccable RPG pedigree, their ultra-ambitious 3D epics do not obviously map onto the skills you might want for producing a frothy, lightweight 3D Mario title. It just doesn't seem like the most logical fit, or even perhaps the best use of Monolith Soft's absolutely incredible talent. But what about an internal team? That's certainly a possibility, but I think it is a slim possibility. Nintendo is expanding its internal studios, yes, but of the dozens of Mario spin-off titles every decade, they're almost always external teams, except for the most prestige titles like Mario Kart and the platform titles. I can't think of any precedent in recent years for Nintendo taking back a title in-house that was originally external. I know there are rumours that this may happen with Donkey Kong, but that's a long way off, if it's even true. All things considered, if Nintendo are tapping developers they've used before for this game, I'd give a 10% chance that it's one of Grezzo, NLG, Retro, Way Forward, or Monolith Soft. In fact, almost, and I do emphasise almost any known Nintendo team, or even Nintendo EPD themselves, I'm bundling up in this 10% forecast. I just don't see many of them as being particularly good fits. Now, maths fans may have worked out that there is a 30% shaped hole in my forecasting, and that's because there is one studio I won't include in the prior list, but which just makes a lot of sense. That's because, as Master Yoda once wisely said, there is another. There is one developer who has not produced a title since 2021, but has a track record of banging out Switch titles on a 3-year rhythm, and who have a long history of working with Mario, and a long history of working on RPG titles, and who even in recent years refer to themselves as RPG developers, despite having spent decades on tennis and golf titles primarily. I'm sure by now you've worked out that I'm referring to Camelot Software Planning. Now, it's not like Camelot appear to have a large bank of Mario and Luigi staff working for them. Comparing the credits for Bowser's Inside Story and Bowser Jr.'s Journey to Camelot's last title, Mario Golf Super Rush, it is evident that the only real areas of crossover on the development side were producer Toyokazu Nanaka, who works on many Nintendo projects anyway. This would certainly be more of a leap for Camelot to get into the right headspace to produce Mario and Luigi. That said, Camelot is a mainstay in the Nintendo orbit, and even if the overlap between the Mario and Luigi team and Camelot is relatively thin, nobody would doubt their ability to take the franchise on. Moreover, they are, as a company, at a real crossroads. They have been solidly putting out tennis and golf titles for a long time, with even Mario Sports Superstars on 3DS being a collaboration with Bandai Namco, where Namco handled the other sports. The last truly different game they did was their most recent Golden Sun title for the 3DS in 2010, and I would love to see them lighting up the skies with another Golden Sun, or better still, returning to their roots as the creators of the utterly sensational Shining Force series, but realistically, I think these are distant prospects. But with the Switch's lifespan being so long, there just isn't a need for another golf game or tennis title, and while they might cannibalize the mechanics into a more general audience type of game, something they have done before with non-Mario golf titles, a more likely option perhaps is that they tack to their RPG roots, and doing so under the wing of Nintendo would make a lot of sense for them as a company. All things considered, therefore, I have to put down a Camelot-developed Brothership at a 30% chance, again assuming that it is not a completely new dev team. I don't think it's as likely as Ilka, and I think ultimately Nintendo will want the game to be developed by people with a proven passion for it and history with it, rather than tapping an all-new development team if they can help it. After all, there was never any question that the quality of what Alpha Dream were doing, at least outside the remakes, was pretty good, and Nintendo does like to stay loyal to its long-standing development partners. Relationships are very important to the company. Otherwise, Camelot does feel like a very good fit, but of course I'm low-key quite pleased if Camelot aren't on this game, as it keeps the hope alive that they could be doing something awesome with one of their legacy franchises. But now that I've set out my takes on the likelihoods, it's surely time to place your bets in the comments below so that you can come back in November and gaze with mellow smugness at your wisdom and foresight. In the meantime, please check out these videos on screen, and I will catch you again soon for another Nintendo Forecast.